Okay, take two.
Okay. Maybe it's my focal range. Maybe my copy's strange. Blame it on my ADD, yeah. Maybe it's my shutter speed. Maybe it's more gear I need. Blame it on my ADD, baby.
That's an all original theme song for the Canon ADD. Yes, Canon continues the naming tradition that they started with the 7D and 70D of making names that are really difficult or weird to say. Today we're going over the specs and features of the new 80D, and we're comparing it against comparable cameras like the 70D, like the 7D Mark II, the Sony Alpha 6300, the Panasonic GH4. We'll tell you all the new and cool things. First up, this is kind of Canon's best video camera because of a lot of reasons. Because it has this awesome articulating touchscreen, because it has an amazing video focusing system. But we're kind of surprised to see that it's still an HD camera, 1080p. Now, they did upgrade the video. It was 30p in the predecessor, the 70D, and now it's 60p. And that's good. 60p is better than 30D. But we've been shooting 4K for almost 2 years now. In fact, when we found the Panasonic GH4, we ditched our 70D, which had been our main camera, because we just loved 4K. And we missed the dual pixel or the video autofocusing capabilities of the 70D. And Canon is saying that the dual pixel AF in the 80D is supposed to be much better. And it was awesome before. It was the best before. For doing things like those tracking shots where somebody's walking towards the camera, the 70D has always been amazing. And I'm confident the 80D is actually better. Canon makes a lot of video cameras, so they have a lot of expertise in this area. So for shots like that, where you can't afford to have a separate focus puller and you just need to get any sort of action, I think the 80D is going to be the best camera in the world. Another feature that it has that the 70D had too was Wi-Fi. But Canon didn't mention any big improvements in the Wi-Fi arena. They just kind of said it still has Wi-Fi. And that's discouraging to me. I mean, it has NFC now too. NFC, near field communications. It just makes setting up the Wi-Fi a little bit easier if you have an Android phone, really. I don't think it works at all with iPhones. But it's still kind of a clumsy process, even with NFC. And then by the time, what you actually want to do with Wi-Fi is put some pictures on some social media like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and it's still a very, very, very clumsy process. And if you don't believe me, go to stp.io/Wi-Fi, like it says there, and you'll see a review of the Wi-Fi features of the 70D and several other cameras. And I kind of discuss the massive problems that the Wi-Fi system has that make it so unusable that myself and other photographers tend to just use our smartphone and then take a picture of the LCD screen on the back of the camera rather than firing out these Wi-Fi features. So it has Wi-Fi and Canon markets it, but really it's just Wi-Fi in name alone. Nobody uses the Wi-Fi feature 5 times. You just don't. You try it once, you try it again, and then you're like, this is not worth it. So what are the implications of not having good Wi-Fi? Well, the DSLR market, the interchangeable lens market in general, has been plummeting, absolutely plummeting. And these are some numbers from our friends over at lensvid.com that just show that the industry since really 2010 has been dropping off fast, and it's because of the popularity of smartphones. Smartphones are not as good as DSLRs or mirrorless cameras at taking pictures, but they're much better at sharing pictures. They're also more portable. But I think the biggest thing is that within a couple of taps on your screen, you can share your picture. I know I use it all the time to share pictures. And so many of you are going to say, you're just typing an angry comment just now saying, real photographers don't need to post on the internet right away. But every photographer I know has Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and they're updating it on a regular basis. That's an important part of the business now. But even if what we want to do with these cameras is get young people involved, and the Wi-Fi system is so appalling. If you try to get a teenager, they post pictures all the time, but try to get them to use the Wi-Fi features of the 70D or 80D, and you'll see it's ridiculous. Canon's bragging about the shutter being tested to 100K exposures. I suppose that's good. I've never ever had a broken shutter, but it must happen. The new camera has a 24 megapixel sensor, like its lower level siblings, the T6S and the T6i. We love the sensor in those cameras. They produced high quality images too, closer to those from Sony and Nikon. That's a big step up, a 20% step up from the 20 megapixels that the 70D had. If you're curious about just how much extra detail that's going to get you, I have a whole video on it. Visit sdp.io/MP. But the answer is you'll probably see like 10% more detail. You would be better off spending your money on better quality glass, something like the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, if you are actually looking for sharper images, rather than just upgrading that. I expect the image quality to be a little bit better than the 70D. It's been almost 3 years since the introduction of the 70D. So we should see, maybe like a 30% improvement in image noise. But who knows? We'll actually get it in and we'll run it through some tests. So be sure to subscribe to see it. It continues to have 7 frames a second, which is fast enough for most people casually shooting sports. That's a big step up from the lower level cameras, which have 5 frames per second. In other words, it's great for action. The 80D, based on our experience with the 70D and other cameras, the 80D should be the best all-around camera for people who dabble. For people who want to do some landscapes, that tilting, articulating screen will be perfect. If you want to shoot some sports, the great focusing system and the high frames per second will work out just great. It's great for casual video and things like wildlife. You can put a big lens on there and it works. It gets the job done. We don't yet have the numbers on how many raw pictures it can take, so stay tuned for our full test of it. That this can be a really important number for those who do want to take sports and wildlife. The viewfinder on it has 100% coverage, which is not something I've ever cared about. I've never been like, this viewfinder coverage is terrible. That just means you can see all the edges of it and nothing is cropped out in the viewfinder, but I always leave a little bit of space to crop later anyway, so I don't really mind. They've upgraded the focusing system compared to the 70D. It now has a full 45 AF points. This is not the focusing system from the 7D Mark II, but it is spread apart further. Another big upgrade to the focusing system is that it now does f8 autofocus on 27 of the autofocus points. Assuming you're using one of 2 lenses with a 1.4x teleconverter, you can use the 100 to 400 Mark II with the 1.4x Mark III teleconverter, or you can use the 200 to 400 f4 with the 2x teleconverter, and it's built-in 1.4x. So you have kind of a limited selection of lenses you can use those full f8 autofocus points with, but you can always use that center autofocus point with any lens that autofocuses. So, for example, this big 400 or 500 millimeter f4, I could put a 2x teleconverter on that, and with the 80D, I would still be able to autofocus at the center autofocusing point. That's something that only the higher end cameras have had, but we do find it useful. It's if you're a wildlife shooter, you're nodding your head. You're like, great. This is a great budget wildlife camera. They're asking $1,200 for this camera brand new. You can pre-order it at sdp.io/80D. We get a few pennies out of every dollar. That helps us support the stuff that we do here. Amazon is saying they'll ship it on March 27th, 2016. Sometimes those dates slip. So what's not to like about this? What are some of the disappointments? Well, it's still a very big camera. So I personally never felt like the 70D was too big, but some people prefer smaller cameras, and you can see if you go to a mirrorless camera like the Alpha 6300, it's substantially smaller. We have the Panasonic GH4 in the middle there. For scale, sorry, no bananas. Also, no 4K. 4K video has 4 times the resolution of regular 1080p HD video that the 80D includes. So you can see the little black box down here shows you just how much detail, how many megapixels it actually captures compared to a full 4K. And if you're saying nobody needs 4K, the eye can't see 4K, please check out my video at sdp.io/y4k, because I tell you from a person who shoots and edits video, just how useful 4K can be, even if you're presenting at 1080p. We started 2 years ago, and for our in the field videos, not the in studio videos, but for the in the field videos, we always shoot 4K. Another disappointment is it's more the same. It has the same optical viewfinder as every SLR has for 50 years or however long they've been around. And I'm somebody who switches from mirrorless to SLRs for different purposes. And every time I pick up the SLR, I end up blowing a bunch of pictures. This is a screenshot of my Lightroom where you can see all the pictures in the background are overexposed because I shot with an SLR. And I forget that when you shoot with an SLR, you have to take a picture and then chimp, take a picture, chimp. So there was just something happened with my camera. I probably forgot the exposure compensation on. But when you use a mirrorless camera, you see the exposure you're going to get in the viewfinder. You can see a histogram even. So you don't have to shoot and check. You know ahead of time that you're going to nail the picture. And sometimes with an SLR, you get back and you've screwed up a bunch of shots because you're just human. If you're curious about why I love electronic viewfinder so much, go to sdp.io/mycam and I kind of tell you about my favorite camera. Also, a bummer is that Canon continues to include low-pass filters on a lot of their sensors. These low-pass filters are designed to reduce the effects of moire, which is that weird kind of just weirdness you get on like fine clothes, the texture of clothes and brick walls and stuff. But it's just not so much of a problem for me. But on the cameras we've tested where they take off that low-pass filter, we see anywhere from 15 to 25% more detail. As if you had just a massive jump in megapixels. Taking off that low-pass filter gives you much, much sharper images. So it is kind of a bummer anytime you have to use a camera that has one of those. It also continues to have this retro LCD on the top. I did some research. This is the Canon T70 from 1984. And if you Google the T70, go to Google Images and search for the T70 and you'll see magazine ads from 1984 where they brag about the awesome LCD display on top and how useful it's going to be. But it's so far behind times. We have a little $600 camera that has a nice full color display on top that can reconfigure itself differently depending on what you're doing. It can be red at night or in bright sunlight. These LCDs are good at nothing. There are so many better technologies that save power and are clearly visible even in daylight, even at night, that we just have time to move on. And Canon, by the way, the whole design of the camera really hasn't changed much in, 32 years. It's almost old enough now that it can be cool again, but it's not. Like, this is a cell phone from 1984. So look at your cell phone and think how far things have come in 32 years. And then think to yourself, Canon, a major consumer electronics company, is still using the same LCD. In fact, almost all the camera looks exactly the same. They just keep changing the numbers. Why won't they make a design change? This is a laptop from 1984. They've gotten so much better. Look at those little Apple Air laptops and stuff. Canon, I feel like you're that guy who won't shave his mullet. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm that chick at the end of Titanic, and I'm trying to save you. I'm saying, look, just get on this floating piece of wood. There's plenty of room. And you're like, no, the water's fine. I'm just going to chill out here. We want to save you. Things are going downhill. Nobody show a 16-year-old one of your cameras, and they will say, like, oh, this is kind of cool. How old is this? It's new, but it doesn't look new. It looks 30 years old because you haven't changed it. We want to see something new. Sales are dropping. If you want to get young people involved, you need to compete with smartphones. You don't need to compete with 1980 cameras anymore. Let's rethink the whole design. Still no focus peaking on this camera that I can tell. Focus peaking incredibly useful for those of us who use manual focus, especially for video. Just a little demonstration. This has become a pretty standard feature in a lot of video focused cameras. And I know some people are saying, why do you keep going on about video features? This is a stills camera. Well, it's not just a stills camera. Canon markets it like a video camera. And so I kind of need to address the marketing material because there are a lot of people who will think this is a great video camera from from the marketing material, and it does have some serious drawbacks compared to comparably priced cameras. It also seems to be missing the Canon log feature, which is just a way to increase the dynamic range that you capture in video. It allows you to get the detail in bright clouds and see somebody's face clearly, even though it's cast in shadow. For a filmmaker who's shooting in high contrast situations, it's really important. A lot of cameras nowadays are coming with sensor stabilization, and we found this feature to be so incredibly useful. It means you can slap on any prime lens without image stabilization, like a 50mm f1.8, and suddenly it's stabilized. And because you can use those fast primes and get them stabilized, that means you can take handheld pictures in dark environments. Suddenly you have this low light monster. You can do that with a Pentax, with a Sony, with an Olympus, but still nothing like that from Canon. And if you just use the stabilized zooms, you don't care. But if you're a person who likes primes or who wants to work in low light, that can be a game changer. And right now, when those people ask me, I have to steer them to other manufacturers. Let's compare the new 80D to its predecessor, the 70D. You can see, I hope to see the 70D drop in price now. It's certainly available for much less used, but the prices are pretty close. But the fact is, it's not really anything has changed. Like, I can tell that they added custom modes to the 80D. That's not something I find useful. Some people like it, but it's not a big deal. Otherwise, it's just the identical camera. Like Canon, they upped a couple of numbers inside, but they're like, here's the same camera again. It's been 3 years. It's the same thing. So the sensor has 20% more megapixels. Instead of 30p, you get 60p, which is nice. You have some more AF. That's nice. You have some AF at f8, which is great for wildlife photographers. And it looks like the video AF will be incrementally better. About the focusing points, here's the 80Ds focusing points. Here's the 70D's focusing points. So as I flip back and forth, you can see there's quite a bit more coverage. And this is going to be meaningful to you no matter who you are. If you're a portrait photographer, it means it'll be that much easier to focus on the model's eyes and use the rule of thirds. It means you won't have to use focus and recompose nearly as much. This focusing system, this is probably the single feature that you will appreciate more than anything else as far as it being improved. Let's compare the 7D Mark II to the 80D, and you can see the 7D Mark II still has quite a bit more coverage with the focusing points. They go further out to the edge. And I love the 7D Mark II. I use it all the time. Having those focusing points spread out so much helps tremendously, whether you're shooting wildlife or portraits. So this might be a reason to consider upgrading to the 7D Mark II, which is only $650 more. It's starting to encroach in that same range, and you can pick up a used 7D Mark II for substantially less. A couple of major differences. The 80D has more megapixels than the 7D Mark II, but it's substantially slower. Jumping to 10 frames a second from 7 frames a second is a big deal if you shoot action, sports, wildlife. You'll definitely want those 10 frames a second. But the 7D Mark II lacks the articulating touchscreen. And if you're shooting video, that makes the 80D a far more useful camera. It also makes the 80D more useful as a general camera. So the 80D is going to continue to be our recommendation for those who want a camera that does everything in the Canon lineup. Because that articulating touchscreen just helps the usability so much. You can talk about numbers all you want, but the ability to flip that screen out helps in so many shooting scenarios, whether you're holding the camera over your head or you're shooting down low to the ground, or if you're a YouTuber and you're trying to film yourself, you can flip that screen around and actually watch yourself. Actually, both cameras have the f8 autofocus. Let's compare the 80D to its new little brother, the T6S, only $150 cheaper. So if you have that extra $150, I would definitely push you to get the 80D, mostly because of the better controls. The 80D has more buttons and just better dials, and it just feels better in the hand, and that really helps as you start to get more serious and you're making adjustments to the exposure compensation and the aperture and the shutter speed. Things like that just work better on the 80D than they do on the T6S. Also, the autofocus overall is going to be better, and it goes up to 60p and 7 frames a second from 5 frames a second. So that does seem like a worthy upgrade, though we might also see the T6S price come down soon. Let's compare it to Sony's new Alpha 6300, which we'll have our hands on just in next week. The A6300 is substantially cheaper at $1,000, but it offers 4K. And if you're an HD shooter, you can actually shoot good slow motion at 120p. It has S-Log 3. actually a higher frames a second, even with live view and even with focusing. But really key here, it's the A6300 is lacking the articulating touchscreen. It has a tilt screen and it doesn't have touch. So for which of these is the better video camera? Well, this will capture better images, but the 80D is going to be so much more usable. So it's a huge compromise either way. The 80D has access to the entire Canon lens lineup, which includes a lot of fantastic lenses from both Canon and third parties. The Sony has a much smaller lens lineup, especially if you limit yourself to the APS-C lenses, if you don't want to suffer the image quality degradation that comes from putting a full frame lens on the APS-C body. But again, I was talking about how much I love EVFs, electronic viewfinders. The A6300 has that. So this is a tough debate for me because those cameras are going to be right for different scenarios. Let's compare the 80D to the Panasonic GH4. We actually switched from the 70D to the GH4 for our video, and the GH4 is just a fantastic camera. It has, if you're a DSLR shooter, it will feel completely comfortable in your hands, even though it's a mirrorless camera, because it's designed exactly like a mirrorless camera. It's actually more expensive new now, though. You can pick them up used, or sometimes you see special deals for even less than $1,200. The GH4 shoots 4K, of course. It has for a couple of years now. It also does higher frame rates at 1080p. It has Vlog for an extra $100, which lets you capture that extra dynamic range. It shoots at a higher frames per second, but those 12 frames a second are actually kind of useless because the GH4 doesn't have great telephoto lenses and it doesn't have great autofocusing systems for tracking action. So if you are shooting sports or wildlife, definitely get the 80D over the GH4. But overall, the GH4 is a better video camera if you're editing your videos for the reasons I discussed in that other video, why 4K. If you decide to pre-order, please use our link at sdp.io/80D. And if you actually want to learn photography, stop worrying about gear, check out my book, Stunning Digital Photography. If you want to learn post-processing, whether in Lightroom or Photoshop, I have books on those too, and I have a whole book dedicated to camera gear. Check them all out at sdp.io/store, or just go to Amazon, search for Tony Northrup, and check out the reviews on these books. You can order directly from there. We ship worldwide from there. Thanks so much. Tell your friends. See y'all soon.